don't know.
In accordance with the open meeting law, the board states for the record that this meeting is being recorded by NORCAM and may be recorded by other local media. Please rise for the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right. We have a pretty short meeting this evening, but even though there's only a few items on the agenda, the very important items, the most important, signing the bands, right? More important than anything else we're doing tonight. So, Mr. Gilberto, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, thank you to the town treasurer for being here this evening. Mary Ann, thank you. We've gone out to the market, as we do customarily at this time of year, based on short-term borrowing that's out there, and received results back, which I believe have been uploaded into your Dropbox meeting packet for this evening's meeting. And you'll see that there's a summary of the projects for which we'll be borrowing, a memorandum from the town treasurer to the board relative to the borrowing, and also a more detailed sheet from one of the financing houses that we're working with. With that, I'll turn it over to the town treasurer to speak to tonight's business.
Yes. We received 5 bids, and our best bid was from Jeffries LLC for 1.8710 NIC. So they was awarded the bands. Their bands are for $8,118,932, and the breakout of the bands. You want me to go through them all, or you guys have them in your package? You want me to go through them, or?
I personally don't, but I don't know if other board members do.
So the bans are out for a year, so they'll come due this time next year. The exact date is, sorry, 6/14/2019.
Great. Do we have a motion?
We do.
There's a lengthy motion in the packet, yes.
So, Mr. Chairman, I move that the board take the following action. Voted to approve the sale of $8,118,932, 3% general obligation bond anticipation notes, the notes of the town dated June 14, 2018, and payable June 14, 2019 to Jeffries LLC at par and accrued interest, if any, plus a premium of $91,664. Further voted that in connection with the marketing and sale of the notes, the preparation and distribution of the notice of sale and preliminary official statement dated May 22, 2018, and a final official statement dated May 29, 2018, each in such form as may be approved by the town treasurer, be and hereby are ratified, confirmed, and approved and adopted. Further voted that the town treasurer and the Board of Selectmen be and hereby are authorized to execute and deliver a significant events disclosure undertaking in compliance with SEC Rule 15C2-12 in such form as may be approved by bond counsel to the town, which undertaking shall be incorporated by reference in the notes for the benefit of the holders of the notes from time to time. Further voted that we authorize and direct the treasurer to establish post-issuance federal tax compliance procedures in such form as the treasurer and bond counsel deem sufficient, or if such procedures are currently in place, to review and update said procedures in order to monitor and maintain the tax-exempt status of the notes. Further voted that each member of the Board of Selectmen, the town clerk, and the town treasurer be and hereby are authorized to take any and all such actions and to execute and deliver such certificates, receipts, or other documents as may be determined by them or any of them to be necessary or convenient to carry into effect the provisions of the foregoing votes. That's it.
Second.
A motion and a second by Mr. Messeri. Any discussion? None heard. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? 4, 0, and 1. Can Mrs. Minipelli sign them after she comes in? Or is it now that she...
I believe she can sign even though she did not vote.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Oh, now you want us to sign them?
That's the clerk.
Well, that's me.
Do you want me to start them down here?
That's fine.
Yeah. What we could do is, we'll take a minute to do some signing, let Mrs. Minipelli get settled in. and then we can get into the next agenda item. Just in time to sign, Mrs. Minipelli. Bands, we did the bands. Okay, while we're doing this, Mr. Gilberto, do we have how do you want to handle the next agenda item? Is there a presentation or is it a discussion?
My thinking was to offer an update as to the status under item 3, which is the MWRA Andover Water Wastewater update. And then after the update, ask the board to consider a vote on the intermunicipal agreement under agenda item 4, if that works for you. We do not have a presentation. We do have a signed copy of the intermunicipal agreement here in a folder. And we did place documents in the Dropbox folder, but I can speak to that if you'd like. Shall I continue?
Please continue.
Excellent. So as the board members are aware, there was a discussion that this board had on Wednesday evening of last week relative to the language in the intermunicipal agreement for 99-year potable water supply from the town of Andover to the town of North Reading. And since that point in time, Town Council and I have looked closely at the legislation and the language in the IMA and have consulted with Town Council and the Town Manager for the town of Andover. And the feeling is that it would be to both communities' advantage to memorialize the form of the actual legislation so that it's clear upon signature what the desired form of the legislation is. Concurrent with that, we've been in conversations with Representative Brad Jones on Friday and then again today. And we've been able to secure an amendment to the legislation, which language of which was agreeable to the town of Andover, that would clarify one of the lines where there was an extra word, the word of, which, while it did not in any way affect the intent of the legislation, we don't believe that it will be the final form and that it would be corrected along the way anyway. So working with Representative Jones and with his colleagues in the House of Representatives, we were able to modify the bill to reflect that language, which reflects the desired legislation between both North Reading and Andover. And the IMA has been modified to reflect that, that bill. We also clarified in the legislation that, in the intermunicipal agreement, that the bill would not be effective until signed by the governor. And the way it was worded before, it was a little less clear that that would be the case. But obviously, the bill cannot become an act of law until signed into law by the governor, so this just further clarified that. And then, as I indicated earlier to some of the board members, the third thing was just some minor typographical and grammatical errors in there, but that the attorneys both felt needed to be, could be addressed and clarified. With that, a final version was identified and agreed upon late this morning, forwarded to the Board of Selectmen in their meeting packet for this evening's meeting. It was a separate file that should be in your Dropbox folder for this evening's meeting. Similarly provided to the Andover Board of Selectmen at a meeting that began at 4 o'clock this afternoon. And the town manager reported to me a little while ago that the Andover Board of Selectmen had approved the agreement. And in fact, we have both copies of both agreements, the 99-year and the interim period agreement, here signed by not only the Board of Selectmen, but Town Council as well. And with that, I see that the town manager and the deputy town manager have joined us this evening, which I greatly appreciate their attendance here. So thank you for coming this evening, Mr.
I
Flanagan,
was
Mr.
signing
Majorati.
withdrawals because I hadn't seen you in so long.
Likewise.
With that, that's where things stand. And in terms of any further update on the review, I think that we've spoken all that's to be offered relative to the review of both of the options. And I believe at this point the opportunity is there for the selectmen to consider a vote to approve and sign the intermunicipal agreement and the interim period agreement. I'll defer to Mr. Schultz. I don't know if there's anything you want to add, or if you'd rather
I'll wait
not.
for the discussion.
Okay, sure.
You ready?
Ready.
And I'll just note that that motion has changed slightly in form to stipulate that the signature the second time happens without further vote, which I think was the intent of both the town of Andover and the town of North Reading.
That's this one here.
That's that one there, yes, sir.
All right. We don't need anything with this one here.
I don't believe so. We've extended the period of time to June
I know,
4th, and
that's a
if
good thing.
if that action is favorable, then I
All right.
don't believe further action is required.
Mr. Chairman, I move to approve and sign the intermunicipal agreement between the Town of Andover and the Town of North Reading for potable water service for 2018 through 2117, and further to authorize board members to sign, to endorse, and ratify said agreement without further vote of the board at a date following approval by the state legislature and governor of the special act authorizing an agreement with a 99-year term in the form submitted by the towns, and further to approve and sign the associated interim period agreement.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Mr. Schultz.
Yeah, I wasn't able to attend the last meeting. It was my child's birthday. I did have a chance, so I think it was on Friday, to go up to the folks in Andover, very hospitable. They gave me a tour of the water facility they have up there, very impressive place. Mr. Gilberto, Mr. Clark, the three of us traveled up there. I don't think this is a perfect agreement. I don't think anything's perfect in life. I'm going to reluctantly vote for it. I just hope that my concerns about negotiating for sewerage down the road, that I'm not made to be a fool. I'm trusting Andover that they're going to act in good faith and still work with us on that. I do have some grave concerns, given the tenor of the negotiations in the past, but I'm going to reluctantly vote for it tonight. I just hope that, again, everything that was said to me is going to be carried through. That's really all I have to say.
Anyone else? Well, I'd like to just say a couple things, and I'm happy we finally got to this point. You know, we obviously brought it right to the bitter end, of course, but I hope the way forward won't be like that. I really hope that Andover will be a lot more responsive to our needs and work together as a team. Even though you have all the control, it's your water, it's your system, and we look forward to building a partnership. I hope we truly can do that. I think the process we used to get to this point didn't go as I would have hoped and would have expected. But when you run through this whole thing and you look at it, you got to put aside the emotions and a lot of challenges that we faced, which were personality related, which I truly believe a lot of that was. When you put all that aside and you put both paths that the town of North Reading studied, MWRA and Andover, and you look at the quality water source on each side, you look at the quantity, you look at your systems and their systems, everything's pretty good. And they all matched up for me. And when those things all match up, it was just a clear decision for me. The next step is you got to look at the cost to do this and the impact on the ratepayers. And when you meet all the other check marks on all the other things, the only thing left is the price, and I think the price is really good for our community, and I think it brings a lot of value to your community and your ratepayers as well. So I look forward to tonight voting in favor of it, and I again just ask that we truly try to operate with a partnership. Mark has proven, and his department has proven to be very user-friendly and very easy to work with, and we hope we continue to build off that in a more positive way going forward. So if no one else has anything to say, I'm ready to take a vote. Yes.
I just want to also thank Mark and our expert too, and thank everybody that was involved with bringing this to this point. I was completely moving forward with MWRA right until the bitter end, when our team brought back to us that potential for sewerage, and so I appreciate people, all the effort, all the time, the effort that was put in. I relied upon Mark before this, but I think his expertise really shone through here as well, and he's a person who, when he tells you something, you can rely on it as accurate and truthful, and I really appreciate all the extra time and effort you put in, and as well as our expert here. But it's really helped me to make this decision moving forward, and it was a tough one to make, but I do appreciate Andover coming back and putting that on the table, and I would echo what Selectman Schultz says. The thing that made me take the second look was this sewer component here, and as soon as we're ready, I think that's a great benefit to us, and it should be a great benefit to Andover too. So I just want to thank everybody that was involved, and thank our team, thank RTA too for making this happen for us.
Okay, Mr. O'Leary.
I'm glad we're finally at this stage of the game. First of all, that we're making a decision, because that's the first big step that North Reading had to make, is a decision. And I think, a year ago, right about now, we were presented with an option to consider. And as I said before, I applaud my colleagues here in taking the bold step of taking advantage of, take a look at the opportunity that was presented to us and investing in the necessary resources to properly evaluate it and come to some conclusion here. I too thought it would go a little bit smoother between last fall and tonight. But that being said, I hope to say for one last time that we're all set, and I'm glad that we're all set with you guys. So it's through a lot of hard work and effort on both parties' part. This is going to be a long-term relationship, which will serve the foreseeable needs for the town of North Reading, and again, we're grateful for the fact that Andover has the resource to share with us and is doing it in a fair manner and a fair price, and that's key. Again, the opportunity to tie into the Greater Lawrence Sewer District with their help and assistance, because we can't get there unless we go through them. It's a big major factor in our willingness to even consider the option. So they put the right stuff on the table, and they worked hard to convince us that they are willing partners to partner with us, and that's a good thing. And it's a big decision for this community that this board is making tonight. And again, I think we're all to be congratulated for the effort and the resources that were put at it to make sure it's the right one, and I believe it is.
Mr. Misery.
I think tonight we make a very, very major decision that's going to impact the town for 99 years. And I would just like to thank everybody that participated, both in Andover and in North Reading. We did have some frustrating times, but I think we all worked together to try to make this thing happen. So thank you to everybody, our entire board, our administration, our consultant, and our clerk, and the water department, and all the opposite side of the table members that participated in bringing this thing finally to a conclusion. Thank you all.
Thank you and Mr. O'Leary for your efforts on behalf of the board representing us at the negotiating table. And I look forward to getting this behind us and moving forward. So with that said, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous.
And by the way, Andy, thank you for taking time Friday to go up and listen. It's good.
Oh, thank you.
Well done.
Thank you.
So we have copies of the agreement here, right here.
Oh, we got to sign these?
Yep. There's an actual document. If you could sign only where the gray sticky pads are. There are 2 lines for signature in each copy, as you know. We only need to sign on the first.
That one?
I know. I just had a question. No.
I feel like we're signing the Korean War armistice there.
I think it's fine.
So while they're signing, I just had a question for you, maybe Mark, Michael. So what's the next step after we sign tonight? What takes place next?
So the next step will happen in about 90 minutes from now when town meeting gets underway. Any long-term project with Andover will require some measure of construction in place. And we've talked openly with them about our requirement to need to come out of this evening's town meeting with an appropriation in place. So in the next agenda item, we'll be speaking to a variety of warrant articles on which the board has not made a recommendation. And working with town council, we believe we've identified the best path forward to ask town meeting to approve $3 million for construction that would be required for either improvements to the connection that we already have with Andover, or to supplement other funding for a potential new interconnection with the MWRA. And the reason we're proceeding with either of those options being available is because the special act has not been signed into law at this point in time, and there will be a window of time between now and no later than August 15th, when we expect it will be signed into law. In the circumstance where it's not signed into law by that timeline, or where there's a substantial change made to the bill where it does not address either community's needs, and we do not end up with this 99-year agreement in effect, the action that we're proposing for this evening's town meeting would give the town the latitude to continue to pursue either option, but in that scenario, the MWRA for a long-term solution. That's not to say that that definitively would happen, but it is a potential outcome if there were substantial change that were to take place. And all of the terms of what would happen have been, I think, have been vetted in pretty solid detail on Wednesday night with this board and are articulated in the so-called interim period agreement. So the next step is really the warrant articles tonight. And then after that, I'll ask Mr. Clark and Mr. Williamson to speak to where they'll proceed. Mark, I don't know if you want to take the first response on that.
Before we do that, if I could add one step prior to that, as a favor. And if we have the opportunity before you, on your way from here to town hall, a town meeting, is to just reach out to MWRA, to Fred Lasky, and let him know that we made a decision. I think we owe it to them to let them know as soon as we can, and even if it's in the form of a voicemail, but then the follow-up with a personal phone call. And I think we owe them a debt of gratitude for sticking by and waiting patiently for us to make this decision, and allowing us the opportunity to vet both options. So I think that's a priority. And I think as a board, we should publicly thank them. And because honestly, we really didn't have another option without them. And I don't like the way the optics of how this has all looked, you know, because we've been so focused on getting this IMA completed. But everybody sitting at this table understands how valuable their presence involved in as an option for a quality new water source, how important that was to us as a community. And we shouldn't overlook that. So that's all I'm going to ask. That
Certainly.
we try to make that a priority.
Yes.
And also, just to add, Mr. Chairman, acknowledge also and reach out to Town of Reading,
Yes, in the town of Reading.
because they've
Great
been
point.
good partners.
In this, there's four. So, yeah, there is.
Can you imagine how this is gonna, what this is gonna look like in 100 years when they have to dust it off?
One of the comments made up in Andover was, we should make sure we don't lose it for 100 years. Figure where to put it.
Well, it's gonna be virtual paper by then
Yeah,
anyway.
exactly.
Scan it right away.
I believe they're all set.
Yes.
Okay, next. Go back to Steve.
So moving along to warrant
back to
article recommendations. We have some lingering business related to this evening's town meeting that we'll ask the board to take up. The first is relative to Article number 1, which is a fiscal year 20. Gentlemen, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Here we go, straighten our hands.
We're just gonna take a recess for a minute.
Thanks for having me out last week. Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming down, guys.
Thanks for sticking with us. Thank you. Congratulations. Best of luck to you. Thanks very much.
Where's the finance committee meeting?
Finance committee, I don't know, probably.
They're up at the high school, so.
At the high school?
Yeah, but you need to be here first, so you're in the right spot.
Oh, we are?
You are,
Okay.
yes. Maybe we'll take them up
Okay,
first.
we can reconvene.
Mr.
Sorry.
Chairman, through you, I'm going to suggest that we maybe move to to Article 37, out of deference to our guests who are here from the Northeast
Absolutely.
Metropolitan Vocational School District. Thank you very much for being here.
They wouldn't mind coming up to the desk where the microphone is and having a seat.
I'll sit back here, I live at the speed.
Article 37.
Article 37, which is authorization that the Northeast Metropolitan Regional Vocational School is seeking from town meeting for purposes of establishing a district stabilization fund. As I mentioned at the previous meeting, due to an oversight in my office, we failed to invite you to a previous meeting to discuss this, which is why we've asked you to be here this evening. That's the bad news. The good news is you only have to come once because the town meeting is also tonight, so hopefully all of the steps will be addressed within the next 5.5 hours or so, plus or minus.
Or Thursday.
Or Thursday, yes, hopefully not Thursday. So with regard to that, some of the questions that we've asked is sort of what's the reason for establishing the fund, what you would think the financing model would be, and I know you've answered that question before, and then where you stand within the district for other approvals that are required as well, because I believe you need approval from each of the member communities. Majority, okay, so if I could ask just for your introduction and then maybe to respond to those questions.
Yeah, does anyone need Mr. Bacon to explain?
Actually, if we could just start with an introduction, who you are, so
Sure.
the folks at home that are listening.
Oh, hi, I'm David DeBarry, Superintendent at Northeast Metro Tech Vocational School.
Yep. Jay Pacone, I'm the Director of Finance for Northeast Metro Tech.
And that's Judy.
And I'm Judy Diamond, I'm the school committee member for the vocational school.
Please.
So we could start with having Mr. Bacon explain a little bit about the fund itself, or the account itself, and then I can talk a little bit about why we brought it forward to begin.
Yeah, so
Thank you, Superintendent.
On August 10th of last year, in accordance with Mass General Law 71, Section 16G and a half, the school committee, Northeast School Committee, voted unanimously to establish a regional stabilization fund based on that statute. The second part of that requires the appropriating authorities or a majority of the appropriating authorities to vote this same fund. The fund is basically for capital expenditures. It needs to, in order to use the fund, we need to appropriate the amount of funds within the budget each year. Then that appropriation can never exceed 5% of our total assessment costs on it for the previous year. We intend to use the fund only for capital expenditures, and that's really what the fund is only for. Plus the fact that in order to appropriate the funds, the school committee would need to vote on us putting it within the budget. So we intend to be we don't intend to use the fund very often, only for major capital expenditures or anticipated capital expenditures.
Mrs. Minipelli.
How many other communities have voted to institute this stabilization fund?
Do we have the exact number?
We don't, so I believe most of the communities are going through the process right now of voting that, because I think when they received the letter, the fall meetings had already taken place, and most of the communities are voting on it now. So I reached out today, and I wasn't able to get many responses from those other communities.
But do you think they're on other communities' town meeting warrant articles like
Yes,
they're on
definitely.
ours?
Yes.
All of them?
Yeah, I believe so, yes.
And this would be a portion of funds that's already given to the school that would be separated out? In other words, it looks like from the reading of it, it's under your direction and control, so you would be determining what the amount is and what the use is, so it goes over to you for your sort of determination and no
Well, it's
other-
always under the discretion of the school committee. So the school committee would determine where the funding, or what the funding would be used for. We would make a recommendation, the school committee makes the ultimate decision.
Mr. Schultz?
Have you guys received any pushback from any communities or any downvotes at town meetings?
Not that I'm aware of, because of the fact we're not asking them to fund it.
Yeah.
We're just asking for just the establishment of the fund.
And as a follow-up, what would happen if one of the communities, would everybody have to be tying into this, or what if you had some communities that didn't vote for it and some did?
We would just need a majority vote, which would be 8 communities to vote for it.
Anybody, any questions?
So just to be clear then, because I know we're gonna get asked this, so we're voting to say yes, make this happen, the stabilization fund, but we're not voting to, and there's no requirement for us to vote to say, and in addition to that, we're gonna be funding it with X amount of dollars annually.
Correct.
Mr. O'Leary?
So it's just going to be from with the current assessment, you're just gonna allocate a portion of that over to this fund. It's not an increase in the assessment at all.
Correct, that's how
So it makes sense, just another tool for you to
Save money.
earmark the funds, have it available, carry it from year to year, so you don't have to expend it every year. And then at the discretion of the school committee, they can utilize it.
Yes.
Makes sense from a management standpoint, great.
Mr.
This is totally independent of moving ahead with repairing or rebuilding or building a new Voc school.
Right,
Yes.
It's got nothing to do with it, basically.
right. Well, we anticipated the chance that if we don't go forward with the new building, that there would be major capital renovations that would need to be made
And
at
you
some
start
point in the
using
future.
this account for those capital improvements.
Yeah.
Mr. Gilberto?
I was just wondering if we might be able to ask for an update on the status of your proposed school building authority project. I think many of us are
Sure, we're
aware.
actually, we were officially invited into the MSBA on Friday, so we knew that it was coming, but, so we're in the very early stages now of the eligibility period.
And what is that window for you to decide?
I believe we have 270 days to complete a feasibility study and then possibly bring it to the towns for funding for a project.
So
So-
time frame, I'm sorry.
Okay, so next October, we have June and October town meeting.
Right.
I would anticipate you're gonna take most of the 270 days.
Yeah.
So before you come back to communities, it would probably be October at the soonest for us.
Yep, I did know, I have a timeline, unfortunately, I didn't bring it with me tonight, I do have an exact timeline,
Okay.
though.
My question was really somewhat related to that. Do we have a chance that we're gonna be required to have a special town meeting to meet a timeline? That was my concern, but
Right. No,
Sure.
what we actually did this year was the feasibility study is part of our operating budget, so we would not need to have to come to you and ask you for more money. Unlike what would probably happen if it was within your town, you'd have to have a vote on the feasibility study. We would do the feasibility study and then a secondary vote for the project itself. So we do not have to have that first vote. And then at some point after the feasibility study's done, we would go out to the towns and, you know, pitch the options.
and Mr. Gilberto?
Could you just tell us a bit about the approval process for an actual construction project?
Sure, so right now, we are grandfathered in at above 72% reimbursement. From the state, it could increase, as you all know, based on different initiatives, green energy and such. We would be looking to put the project out on a 30-year bond, and it would be proportioned out based on your student enrollment. So whereas North Reading has a much less of an enrollment, that Northeast York portion would be much less than a lot of the bigger cities or towns. And then, as I said, it would be divided amongst the 72, 73%, and then split up. My hope is that it wouldn't have a huge impact on the year-to-year financial situation with North Reading.
Mr. Chairman, through you, what do you require from approval from the member communities in order to proceed with a project?
It would have to be unanimous.
Okay.
If it's not unanimous, we can go out to a vote amongst all of the districts, a one-time special election, and get vote of approval.
And so you anticipate asking your member communities to make a decision sometime after the 270 days or within the after?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, and after this 270 days, there are still steps, we need to take. Again, I'm sorry I'm not prepared with those, timelines. They're sitting on my desk if you want to give me a call.
No, this is very helpful, actually.
Yeah.
Thank you. I wasn't aware of the approval. Last I had heard, you were kind of still hoping for some approval at a future point in time, so I'm sure that was good news for you to hear.
Absolutely.
I know you didn't come here prepared to talk
Yeah.
about it. Just curious
You've done a great
While
job.
you're here.
The location, are you going to be keeping the old one running and building it on site?
Yeah, so we have enough land, fortunately, to do that.
So to the left of the school, I assume?
There were 3 options when we did a pre-feasibility study to see if it was even a possibility, and we had spoke about that last year. And there were 3 places it could possibly be. The most ideal place for the pre-feasibility study was behind the building on our practice football field. However, when you do the actual feasibility study, it's much more in depth, and that could change.
Good. Mr. O'Leary.
First of all, I'd like to recognize and note our appreciation for our representative on the school committee, Mrs. Diamond, who is, and then my condolences, because she's going to be chair of the building committee. I don't know if she knows what she's getting into here, but I'll tell you, you've got a long road ahead of you, and it's...
We can give you a lot of...
We can give you a lot of, aspirin, because it's a long road ahead, but it's
worth
when it's all done, it's worth it. It's worth it, but it's a lot of work.
Well,
And-
I've been getting a little advice from, I'm sure you know, different people in North Reading that were very involved in the project, and we will have them, invite them to the school, because we look forward to talking to everybody and getting their opinions. It's a big project, we're very excited about it. North Reading should be excited about it, because it's gonna be a state-of-the-art facility. And, we just graduated 298 seniors Friday night. Obviously, we're doing something right, and there's a big demand for vocational education. And we're excited moving forward.
Yep. No, it's been a great facility, a great school for the kids from North Reading who've gone there, and I know you've been a part of that for years, both on the faculty and administrative side and now on the school committee side. But this is a big undertaking and a big project, and I look forward to the proposal and look forward to support it down the road when you finally come through the whole process. But good for you, and thank you in advance.
Thank you.
Okay. If there's nothing else said, I'll take a motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend Article 37, establish Regional School District Stabilization Fund.
Second.
I have a motion and a second by Mr. Messeri. Any more discussion? None heard. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you very much.
Now, good luck getting to the Finance Committee meeting, because there's a grand march going on at the school.
I know. Very poor planning.
Well, we'll hope we have a warrant article on that tonight that'll help us from that happening ever again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to the other motion, the other articles.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, through you. Article 1, which is a fiscal year 2018 budget amendment. There's only one action that the board is being requested to request of town meeting, and that is for a transfer in the amount of $8,582.63 from Parks and Recreation retained earnings to expenses. And for those who do not know, that would cover the cost of a repair to the roof of the so-called barn at Ipswich River Park, which was dealing with the combination of deterioration of the condition of the roof, as well as some portions being blown off due to a storm. Repairs were made late winter, early spring. They were in excess of what was available in the FY18 budget for Parks and Recreation, and we're recommending this transfer.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I move to recommend Article 1, fiscal year 2018 budget amendment.
Second.
I have a second by Mr. Messeri. Any discussion? None heard. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous.
bear with me one moment, Mr. Chairman. Article 4, transfer of funds to the Water Stabilization Fund. So in discussion with the water superintendent, as well as with the finance director, our recommendation will be to transfer the balance of retained earnings, which were certified late last year, based on the end of fiscal year 2017, into the Water Infrastructure Stabilization Fund. The amount is $1,001,902. We've prepared a motion accordingly, and again, these funds would be transferred into the Water Stabilization Fund at this town meeting, and we anticipate that we would be revisiting a use of a portion of that amount based upon the final outcome of the MWRA Andover planning effort in conjunction with the fiscal year 2020 water rate hearing. We don't anticipate making any such alteration prior to that point in time, just because of the timing. And again, for those who may not be aware, we have intentionally been trying to generate retained earnings to create revenue to stabilize the transition associated with the construction costs for the MWRA. Those costs will be much less, far reduced, comparatively speaking, if we go down the Andover route. Again, once we have that all ironed out, we expect to account for it in the fiscal year 2020 water rate process.
That being said, Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend Article 4, fiscal year 2018 transfer of funds to Water Stabilization Fund.
Second.
A second by Mr. Schultz. Any more discussion? None heard. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, we've presented the board with action on Article 5, which is the General Stabilization Fund. This may be clarifying, because for some reason I think the board may have voted at the last meeting, but regardless, the intention is not to recommend a transfer into the stabilization fund at this point in time. We did not include such a transfer in during our financing plan. We look to try to do something at the fall town meeting in October, and with that, the recommendation is to pass over this article.
So why wouldn't we, I'll just move to pass. I'll move to recommend passing over.
Sure, yep.
All right. Mr. Chairman, I move to pass over Article 5, fiscal year 2018 appropriate money to stabilization fund.
Second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Minipelli. Any discussion? None heard. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous.
Mr. Chairman, Article 6, which is a transfer in from fiscal year 2018 for the other post-employment benefit liability trust fund. Our recommendation will be a transfer of $250,000 from the pensions and benefits appropriation, specifically health insurance. That's a projected surplus to be available, separate and distinct from the so-called performance of the PFA, which we'll be addressing at a later point in time. This is, again, separate and distinct from that. They are savings that we've projected that we would realize, and they were also part of our discussions for the fiscal year 2019 process, meaning that we had a significant buffer in the health insurance budget, which we took into account for the fiscal year 19 process. And so again, the action being recommended to the board is a transfer of $250,000, and we ask the board to recommend.
Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend Article 6, fiscal year 2018 transfer of funds to other post-employment benefits liability trust fund.
Second.
I have a motion, a second by Mr. Minipelli. Any more discussion? None heard. All those in favor? Aye. Oh, sorry. Mr. Messeri, take back the
My
vote.
question was related to, obviously, we've hired new employees, and you had said that that would go into our next meeting. So what is the number? What will be the new number you're waiting for?
So the balance is $914,528. The operating number that we've been using for an annual amount to be transferred in is $300,000, and that's what we included in the fiscal year 2019 budget process. Our audit required the actuarial review of that OPEB number, which we expect to have available to us during the summer, which is when we've traditionally brought it forward, and we expect to account for that during the fiscal year 2020 budget process. So again, the balance is $914,000. We already had planned to put in $300,000 as part of the fiscal year 19 budget plan, which is in this warrant, and this would be an additional $250,000.
Okay, thank you. I voted in support of it, Michael. I know I already took the vote.
I'm sorry, I jumped the gun.
No, it's okay.
I didn't see
You didn't
it
call
yet.
it, he didn't call it, go ahead, so call it again.
I'd rather take the vote again, Mr. Misery, if we could. Yes, Mrs. Minipelli.
And what's our current liability?
So it's wavered between 60 and 80 million.
Depends who you
it's-
talk
it
to,
is-
what day of the week.
The good news is it's been on the downward swing, and we believe that some of the plan design changes that we put in effect in fiscal year 2017 have put us on that projected path, and I think we're hopeful that there'll be an additional benefit to that number based on the use of the PFA, which started in fiscal year 2018. But we won't have that for certain until we get to the middle of summer.
Yes, Mrs. Minipelli.
And one fast question, because we talk about this a lot in terms of our 60 to 80 million liability. Is there anything on the horizon for legislative change in terms of the county retirement requirement that we have, funding requirement we have?
So right now, to my knowledge, the deadline that the county retirement system must meet to be fully funded changed in 2007 or 2008. It has not changed since that time, to my knowledge, and they continue to work towards the deadline. I want to say it's approximately 2040, but I couldn't quote that. Their funding mechanism is intended to meet that. They provide a discount for early payment, which we take advantage of, so we get a small discount in order to try to lessen the burden. But that's the best I can probably respond at this point to the question.
All right. If there's no other comments, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous.
Article 7, which relates to the Solid Waste Stabilization Fund. Right now, the balance of that fund is $125,566. You may remember that number was brought up during our discussion about the trash bill and the potential trash fee increase. Right now, based on the projections from the acting DPW director, we're recommending a transfer in of $12,000 to take place during fiscal year 18. And that is effectively revenues in excess of actual costs required under this contract that would be available, which would otherwise close to free cash. As I think the board knows, we set them aside for purposes of being used to address solid waste expenses, which we'll be looking to do and having a more substantial conversation about over the course of the next fiscal year. And the amount would be $12,000, and our recommendation would be to recommend.
Mr. Chairman,
Excuse me, 1 second. You said $12,000?
$12,000, that's correct.
And that's coming from where?
It's from the water infrastructure, excuse me,
this one,
strike that.
solid waste.
Solid waste fees.
Okay, thank you. Mr. O'Leary.
Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend Article 7, fiscal year 2018, transfer of funds to Solid Waste Stabilization Fund.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any more discussion?
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, so what we actually do here is we move the money from the appropriation for solid waste.
Okay.
And so it's in the DPW budget. There's a line for both collection and for disposal. We project the balance that'll be available, and we move that. So I misspoke when I referenced it as fees. It's actually the money that we've appropriated to expend. The budget, as you know, is accounted for using the fees.
So it's from appropriated.
From the appropriated budget appropriated at last June's town meeting. I apologize for misspeaking.
Solid waste?
Solid waste, correct.
Okay. And any more discussion? None heard. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Unanimous.
And Mr. Chairman, finally, before we move to the water-related articles, Article 2, which, and I don't mean to go backwards, but we did not have that in our original listing. It's a snow and ice deficit. So I'm report to the board that we have a projected deficit of about $43,000 from the fiscal year 18 snow and ice budget. You may recall that we were asking for $50,000 under the last recommendation. We're asking the board to revote this with a modified number of $48,000. We believe that will certainly cover the known expenses, and it leaves a small buffer for anything that might come up between now and the end of the fiscal year. Again, about $4,800, I think the buffer would be. That $2,000 that we would be not appropriating would then be utilized towards Article 40, which is the $10,000 for the stormwater engineering for Swan Pond Road. So that's,
You said originally it was 43,000.
so the number we asked for was 50. We're now reducing it to 48, which is why we're asking for the board to revote the recommendation.
Okay.
The actual overage is 43,000 and change, and we're leaving a small buffer to get to the end of the year.
And it's coming from free cash?
Free cash, yes.
Okay, I'll take a motion to amend.
Do we have that in there? I don't have that.
You do not have it in there. I apologize. It's a
Okay.
late breaking item.
Okay.
But the action would be a vote to recommend Article 2.
Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend Article 2, Fund 2018 Snow and Ice Deficit.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any more discussion?
Do we need the, I'm sorry, Mr. Chairman, do we need that to vote that particular amount?
We could clarify for the record that we're voting it again because the amount changed. I
Okay.
don't have any objection to that.
Yeah, if we could make that amendment to the motion.
Okay.
Mr. Messeri, you seconding that amendment?
I did.
Okay. Any more discussion? None heard. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous.
Moving along to the water-related articles, there are 3 of them. One is Article 16, to rescind the authorization to borrow for, it's a general rescission that we wanted to make available with an eye towards the previously approved MWRA articles. I think, as you heard me describe earlier, we do not recommend any rescission take place, and therefore would recommend that the board recommend passing over this article.
The intent would be, if everything goes according to plan, to rescind them in October.
I would be comfortable saying a future town meeting. I'm hesitant to commit to October right now.
Okay.
That's certainly our hope. And maybe before the board votes, I should just describe that we're making the same recommendation for Article 17 to pass over the article, because our recommendation is to appropriate funding for either the MWRA or Andover under Article 18 in the amount of $3 million. We tried to write the warrant in conjunction with town council to have each of these options available to us. We drafted some wording which we provided. They provided it back and recommended that we confirm with bond counsel that this would be eligible, and we got that confirmation from them this afternoon that this would be the proper way to proceed.
So I believe I'm doing this article, right?
Yes, 16 is you, yep.
I don't have it in my packet, that's what I'm asking. If you find it, let me know. Somebody may have it.
Nope, I've got 17, I'll start with 17, so.
Not a problem.
You don't have 16? Your name was on the...
Yeah, no, I don't have it in my list.
Article
It's okay.
16,
We'll get it.
it was not Mrs. Minipelli, or did that change and maybe we didn't catch it?
I have Mike down.
I was 15.
15.
I was number 15, but I'll do the Passover one.
Well, where is it? That's the question.
That's the question. I just want to make sure somebody has it.
Let me see.
Yeah,
I
you got it.
I have 15, not 6, hold on. Yeah.
It's right there. I figured there's one page underneath 50. Yeah.
So,
Somebody's got them all?
so I'll correct this to reflect
Correct
Mr.
it,
Prisco?
Mrs. Minipelli.
Mrs. Minipelli, okay. Great.
Gonna get my exercise tonight.
All right. So I'll take a motion to recommend passing over Article 16.
Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend passing over Article 16, rescind authorization to borrow.
Second.
Second by Mr. Messeri. Any more discussion? None heard. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Article 17.
Mr. Chairman, same situation with this article. We do not require an appropriation under this article because of the recommendation for an appropriation under Article 18, and we would therefore recommending passing over this article.
Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend passing over Article 17, reappropriate previously approved funding for water distribution and supply infrastructure.
Second.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any more discussion?
Who's second?
Mr. Messeri. I have a motion and a second. Any more discussion? None heard. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Unanimous.
And I believe the board already acted on Article 37, which is...
18.
What about 18?
Oh, I'm sorry, the most important one. Excuse me, Mr. Chairman. So this would be the funding mechanism that we
Yes.
discussed for our water and
We got your back.
infrastructure.
We got
Right,
your
thank
back.
you very much to all those who are paying close attention. This would be the appropriation of $3 million for long-term potable water supply solution, either Andover or the MWRA. As such, our recommendation is to recommend the article, and the motion is written for $3 million, which we anticipate would be borrowed.
Mr. Chairman, I move to recommend Article 18, appropriate funds for water distribution and supply infrastructure.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any more discussion? None heard. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Unanimous. Okay. 27.
27?
No, we already, no, we already.
37 we did.
Yep, 27.
27.
27.
I meant 37. I meant 37.
37 we did, yep.
Yep, we just finished that, so we'll, I think that's it, right? Good. Everybody has their motions. I have one less, which is nice.
Mr. Moderator, Mr. Chairman, I move to
Be adjourned.
adjourn and reconvene.
You have a separate meeting notice for 7 o'clock.
Oh,
so you
7
have-
o'clock town meeting, okay, so I move to adjourn.
I have a motion and a second, but before we do, I just want to let the board know that the room is set up very similar to how it's always been set up, except that this time, the board members, all 5 of us, will be facing the crowd. We are able to get tables that fit. Unfortunately, you will have to rotate your chairs to see the presentation, but at least you'll have the opportunity for well, at least the crowd now will have an opportunity to be able to look directly at you as we present each of these motions. So we're going to give it a try. If we don't like it, we can go back to the old design.
That's a great idea.
Mr. Misery.
A question for the town administrator regarding presentation on the water.
Yes,
There were 2 presentations, one was long, one was short.
correct.
Do we plan on making a water report, or, it may not be necessary, but I thought I'd bring it up.
So I saw your note. I mean, it's obviously the purview of the board. I'm not sure making the report on the water. I'm not sure that doing so under the reports Article 8, I believe it is, will address it. We have a number of things on there that are not necessarily directly germane to any one article
Right, no,
that are already in
I
there.
understand.
My personal thinking was that there has been a substantial amount of discussion, and will certainly be reporting back to the community in the slide that was prepared, that the board took this action this evening, and just, I think really,
Under 17?
it would be under 18, yes.
18.
So, I think we would be describing the process. We're certainly always willing to go into a detailed presentation. I just know that there's a number of other things that are going to generate discussion this evening. So I really put it back to the board to decide what's most appropriate.
I wasn't pushing for it.
Yeah.
I was just wondering what your intent was, one.
That's right.
And 2 is obviously there's enough information, if people ask questions, that information could be put up there.
Oh, absolutely.
Answer questions.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, and I've just uploaded that to the Dropbox folder for anyone who would like to look at it. It's entitled Water Update. It's really an updated version of the April 23rd presentation that Mr. Misery, Mr. O'Leary, and the water superintendent made to the board to just reflect where we are today.
Okay. Any other
That's
comments, questions? All those in favor? Aye. We adjourn.